In 1944, a baby girl was put up for adoption in Gisborne, a small town in New Zealand. Born to unmarried Maori and European parents, the child was adopted by a couple, an Irish mother and a Maori father, with the same racial background. Early on, her mother had a remarkable dream.
She actually saw me on the stage of Covent Garden. So I woke up last night, or this morning, and you were there. You've made it to Covent Garden. That's it. And I believed her.
A few years ago I was in Montreal in a television festival, and I was in a bar with a couple of friends that evening, and across at the bar itself was a rather noisy group, merry, cheerful, and when I went across to get a couple of drinks I noticed that one of them was Te Kanawa, and I met her a few times, so it was hail fellow, and it was have a drink and join us, and there were some Australians, and it was great. And when I thought about it, I thought how few people that one knows, that I know anyway, of such high standing, commanding the great opera houses, the palaces of opera around the world, commanding great roles around the world, being in her own way, in her own area. For that period of time, a goddess would come into a bar, have a drink with some pals. There was an ordinariness about her that wasn't feigned. And whenever it could come out it came. And it was so different from the role she played that it was almost a shock. And then when you got to know her better, you realised that that went through everything. Authenticity, never faking it, doing it flat out. That's what she is.
Your first singing teacher was Sister Mary Leo. Can you describe her character and her teaching methods? She sounds
very much like my mother, actually. My mother and Sister Mary Leo didn't get on very well. She was a very domineering sort of lady, and I had to come when I was called. That's why I think my music, my formal education suffered, because I would be trying to sort of study and do all these sort of things, and more often than not I was pulled out from the middle of a class to have another singing lesson or rehearse for the choir. Sister Mary Leo taught you to sing and sing and sing, but never stretched the voice, always to sing in the same area, and it just became more even. And I was in the room next door to her, and she would listen to me through the room all day. And the moment I'd stop, even for a breath or a drink or anything, she'd knock on the wall and off we'd go again. So I was basically having singing lessons all week. Short singing lessons, but very important ones. Then I'd do choir practice, we'd do choir concerts. I would sing at the weekends. In order to get my pocket money, I would sing at weddings, funerals, receptions, anything, to get money for spending money.
Was there ever any temptation or a thought in your mind that you would become a more popular singer, even a pop rock singer, rather than an opera singer at that time?
Well, I think
or did singer mean something clearly defined in your mother and Sister Mary's?
It did, exactly. Absolutely right. You had to go for the top.
Yeah.
There was no half measures. Broadway was just very ordinary. But I think a lot of people would accept Broadway, you know. But my parents and Sister Mary Leo were not about to accept second rate, so to speak. And, Broadway, I think, is quite wonderful. In fact, I envy all those pop singers, you know, the sort of Tina Turners of today, getting out there looking just wonderful. I love all of that. And I find that the operatic world sometimes is very staid and very boring. And I would really love to get out and do all that sort of thing.
So you'd rather be Tina Turner, really?
I'd much rather be Tina Turner any time, with the crazy hair and all of that. Oh, it's wonderful, that voice.
You're simply the best.
It's just so liberated. Opera's not liberated enough for me. If one had the opportunity now and you suddenly said, okay, lose the 30 pounds you need to lose and get into the old mesh stockings and the leather, I could most probably do it, because I would be so it would be wonderful to try it.
Well, I'm
Wouldn't
sure
you like to do something like that? I mean, you must have a secret dream somewhere.
I don't know about the leather.
I mean, Van, you wear suits. The leather, you like the leather?
I said I don't know about the leather.
Oh, I see. You should try it, Mel.
Let's top of the page.
How does work on an entirely new opera, how does it begin?
Painfully. Starting note by note, word by word, like building a house. And just learning and learning, repetition. On the day of performance, I will go up and work with my singing teacher for an hour. Come back, have lunch, sleep from 1:30 to 5:30, drive up and settle myself in for the performance. I think my confidence depends on my little regime of how I get it all together. Have I rested enough? Have I slept? Have I learnt the music correctly? If that all goes right through the day, then my confidence is fine. In New Zealand, I'd just done what Sister Leo had said, and I had really no great structure. I didn't know what it was to time keep. What a mess. I think my reputation in the first year at the London Opera Centre was a bit of a problem.
Why
because a lot of the teachers and coaches from Covent Garden were coaching me, and they said I wasn't a very serious student. I don't blame them, but also
What was it that they would have picked up on?
I think just not being particularly serious. I wasn't sort of really so blinkered in music. I believed that there was another life too, as I kept on saying right at the beginning of my studies and everything. There was always this other side of me that wanted to go whoa, to break out of the mold all the time.
When I first heard Kiri Te Kanawa, I was probably about 11 years old, and I heard a song called Che bel sogno, and I had never heard it before, but I knew it was from an opera called La Rondine, and I thought the opera was just an opera that I always thought that it didn't have any arias for some reason. I'm 11, what do I know? And then I hear this beautiful piano playing and then this gorgeous angelic voice. And I was listening for something to come in that was a very strong sound, and it never came. It was just always peaceful sounding, always gorgeous sounding, glorious. And then she went up to this very, very high note, it's a high C in the aria, and it sounded like, if you can imagine, a chorus of angels singing the most beautiful note ever. That's what it sounded like to me. It was glorious. It actually made me cry. And from that moment on, I thought, I want to sing this aria, Che bel sogno.
The one event that would make Kiri Te Kanawa a global star beyond the world of opera was her performance at the royal wedding in 1981. When we interviewed Kiri Te Kanawa in 1990, she talked very openly about the huge pressure she'd been under and how they'd finally led to a complete breakdown of her health and her professional confidence.
The whole thing was all too much too soon, and really it really wasn't too much too soon, but I got into a situation that I was becoming very well known, being wanted all over the world, and not believing that I was the only one in the world. I didn't believe that. It was just thinking, how can I do all of this? How can I please all this? How am I going to get through all the jobs? How am I going to do them well enough?
Fear would mount in that situation, and of course, the more fearful you got, the more difficult it would be to get better. It would be a race, wouldn't it, really?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'd go on and I wouldn't sing well. And it was just because I didn't believe I could. I got to a stage where I couldn't sleep at all without sleeping tablets. And I was travelling too much. I was sort of always wanted to be home. My family life I was pulled between the two.
Was there ever a point where you didn't go on the stage, couldn't go on the stage at all?
I sang through it. I kept on going. I said, if I stop now, I'll never go back on stage again. I'll just never get on there. I knew I couldn't, because I could hardly face it even then. I could hardly... Just getting out the dress to iron it was painful. And it's taken about 5 years now to really get my confidence back. I needed a lot of support. Des basically didn't leave me for a year.
You said that this is the last big new operatic role you're going to learn. Do you still feel that?
Well, unless they've come up with something else that's really good. I've looked at so many operas to find a new role for me. But, it takes you a year to sing it. It takes 3 years to plan it. I mean, how many more years have I got? I can't see I've got 20 years. I've got maybe 6, 7 years that I'm going to be, still doing this sort of job. And I can't imagine, I can find a role in time to be able to do it. Unless it's something for a very old lady in a bath chair with no voice.
I saw a few weeks ago at Covent Garden, just before she was, a few days before she was going to go on stage for the last time at Covent Garden, where she started and made her first big reputation. And she was going to play the Grande Dame in the fille, régiment, a character part, a pantomime part, really. And I went to the first night to see her, as did the whole audience, to see her. Even though we had Flores singing all the top C's, they went to see Kiri Te Kanawa. And it was really quite remarkable. When she came on stage, flings the doors open, she's only in a tiny bit of the opera, there was applause. When she walked across towards the piano, there was applause. And she pulled out a sheet of music. There was more applause. Was she going to sing? Well, she did sing. They intruded a song, a short song, and she sang that. Everything she did was applauded. Her coming in, her going out, her movement. They loved her. And they loved her, I think, not because of the loviness of opera fans, although that's not a bad thing, but it wasn't that. I think because she'd never let them down. And they trusted her. And they trust her. She's this authentic woman who has always been quite remarkably grounded, knowing how far she started back, how far she had to go, and going steady and steadily and quietly, well helped, but always helping herself to get to the very top. And that's what they were applauding. When we did a wonderful South Bank show about you in 1990, you said you didn't have 20 years left. You said in 1990 you had about 7. So you've broken your view on that.
I suppose maybe I thought that it was time. I was in a situation which was marriage, and I think that was the situation that I was being, I suppose, persuaded to give it up. And in the end, when the situation changed, I decided not to.
Have you managed to manage your character since then?
Yes, it's in fine shape. I'm very happy. I've got a year's work. I've got things in the future that I'm planning to do. I've got a lot to look forward to, and in particular the students I want to mentor and help. I'm very involved in that.
So it's teaching, recitals, but occasionally performances, I see.
Okay, yes, there will be some performances this year, but I think after this I just want to work on the students. I want to go where they are. I want to be on their first nights. I want to encourage them in their rehearsals. I want to boost them up when the things are going down, you know.
She sings the way that opera should be sung. She sings just so, everything is so legato, everything is so perfectly together. She never sounds choppy to me, and that's something that I always try to aspire to. I always try to have that beautiful line. Most sopranos, I think most singers, but most sopranos especially, try to have what Kiri Te Kanawa gives us every time she opens her mouth, which is just a glorious, beautiful, flowing, long, gorgeous sound.
How different, broadly speaking, is the opera world now from that which you entered in 1966?
It's really different. Gosh, it's hard to even, it would take quite a few minutes to explain what I see now. But the singers are still the same. They still produce the same things. They still do what they should be doing. But I sometimes think that the opera houses don't always look after the singers, especially the young ones.
How could they look after them better?
Dear me, you know, I look at them, they go into young people's programs, they are used in some ways, and they're sort of sent off again to another young people's program. So they're not always held like we were held for 4 or 5 years. I was held here for 5 years and loved every minute of it, singing The Countess in The Marriage of Figaro for £50 a week. It wasn't bad. And then they upped it after about 2 years to 75. I thought I was rich.
You were.
I was.
You
I was
were.
£75 a week. It was wonderful, and I would do it all again, but it'd have to be 750,000, I'm afraid. It's a few years back.
you look back on your journey from New Zealand as a child to where you are now with some surprise?
And when you ask the question, I think, what the hell am I doing here, talking to you? Really, I think, oh gosh, it's actually sort of one of those things. You look at the television, you say, oh yeah, well, hasn't she done well? And you think, well, just a minute, this is me we're talking about. And I basically go on and carry on because I feel that I daren't stop. I daren't. I've got to give it my best shot. I've got to give it the 100% that I think is expected of me. I was not given much of a chance at birth, but oh, by gosh, I was going to give it everything I had till the time comes that I can't do it anymore.
Sting is the subject of the latest South Bank Show original as Melvyn Bragg revisits his 1996 interview discussing life with the police and his solo career. You can catch up with that right now on demand. And there'll be more from Dame Kiri in Portrait Artist of the Year. It's the big one, the grand finale, Tuesday night at 8.